Hi, my name is Roly,
Hi, my name is Monica Grace.
and today we're going to tell you our testimony on how we met the Lord and where we were before we met each other and the Lord. So I'm going to go ahead and just start. I'm going to use my phone because I got notes on my testimony. It's not like I can, even though it's about me, I still just can't remember stuff. So I was born in Jamaica, Queens, 1972. Lived there until I was 10 or so. No, 8. Like 8. We moved to Miami in 1980. Once we moved here, growing up, my parents, they pretty much worked all the time. So they were there physically, but they weren't there emotionally. When we lived in New York, it was different. My mom really didn't work, and so she was always with me, and I always felt her love. Once we moved here to Miami, they had to work, and my mom was a nurse, and she did the night shift. My dad worked during the day. I would come home from school. As a 10-year-old boy, nobody's home. And as the years went on, you start meeting your friends, and you hang out, and I was never getting that love from my parents. But from your friends in the streets, you would get love. Growing up in Miami in the 80s, it was in the beginning 80s, it was graffiti and breakdancing. Then from there, the era changed to gang members and being in a gang and drinking alcohol and doing drugs. I think I was in 7th grade, and it was like the week of Thanksgiving, and that was the first time I ever smoked pot. And after then, I kept smoking pot. It took me to a place where I could kind of hide. Like I wasn't depressed. It took a different side out of me. And as years went on, then you start with alcohol. By 9th grade, I would go to school sometimes drunk, and it would just take away the depression of not having love at home and having love on the streets and stuff like that. And as I grew up and got older, the drugs got heavier and the amount got heavier, and that was my escape. The drugs was my escape. I wouldn't be this depressed, quiet kid. I was that happy party kid, not crazy, looking for trouble, or starting fights, but I was just like, the one that everybody wanted to hang out with. And during all that time of doing drugs and stuff like that, I tried to do suicide twice. It didn't work. Obviously, I'm still here. To describe how my depression was, I described it as a kid, I walked in the same circle. So as the years went on, the circle got deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. I remember one time we went to counseling with my parents, and as the sessions went on, we got better. And then on the last one, I had an outburst, and they never said, the counselors never said anything about I think we need still counseling, stuff like that. I mean, it was all recorded and nothing, and it was over food. But my depression was really, it was heavy, and I hid it pretty well because of the drugs and working. Since 11 years old, I worked. My dad used to work at a flea market, and he had a little stand, and he used to take me with him every weekend. So since I've been 11, I've known what it is to earn money and stuff like that. So I've always had a job, and that was another. Obviously, while you're working, you can't be drunk or high. But that's what would help me buy my drugs and my alcohol. As I got older, in my 20s, I would have a relationship with girls. Some would last a year or so, and you always think, oh, this is the one, and then no, it's not. So the love that I didn't receive from my parents and stuff, I would just bury it in whatever girl I was dating and just I would fall in love with them, but I wasn't really in love with them. It was just a companionship. That's what I longed for. To just have somebody to care for me. Because your parents care for you, but it just wasn't what, as a kid, I needed. And having friends, I felt more of companionship and stuff like that. And then as the years went on, I'm in my mid-20s, and then I met this beautiful woman right here. Mm-hmm. And she met me like that, you know, doing drugs and drinking. I was always drinking because that was the only way I wanted to handle life, you know. And it was weird because, like, I'd go to work and I'd be sober and I could work and this and that and I'd be fine. But the minute I got out of work, it was like, okay, I need a drink because I don't want to be me. I want to be the me under the influence. And I would just stay at that level of the alcohol or the drug to just so that I would be me. The hidden me, not the real me. We met in like February of 1996. We dated for like a month or two or something like that, and then we split up. And then we got back together in September of 96. And we've been together ever since. Since September of 96.
Mm-hmm. So let me tell you a little bit about me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was born in California. My mother and my father had 4 girls in total, no boys, all girls. A normal family. Grew up happy as far as I can tell. As you get older, you start to notice things that are just not okay. And one night we just woke up in the middle of the night, and my dad was, beating my mom. And so that was the first time I ever noticed or realized that was happening. My older sisters already knew, but they would always kind of keep us away. But that night it got really bad. And my father was hitting my mother. My mom endured the abuse for quite some time. And it got to a point where she started seeking attention elsewhere, and they end up getting a divorce, and my father ends up moving out, and my older sister moves in with my father. And us 3 girls, the younger ones, stay with my mom. My mom has never worked in her life at this point. She was with my dad, I think, since like 17 or earlier than that. I don't remember. So she's never worked. She's always depended on my dad. So having to care for 3 girls was very hard for her, and very burden and depressing for her. It was hard. It was very hard to care for 3 girls on your own, because my dad left and he didn't want anything to do with us, or he wouldn't help her. He was angry and he didn't want to help provide. So time goes on, and my dad meets this woman that she at this moment has 2 daughters of her own. And we went to go visit my father one time because we had been crying that we wanted to see my dad. And my mom allowed us to go see him. My father arranged it, and we ended up going to visit him at this woman's house. And so that's the first time we've ever met her. She was kind of different than my mom. Of course, she's not my mom, so the care wasn't as, as your parents care for you and your kids, so you don't know. We would fight with her girls, and we wouldn't get along with her very well. We didn't really care for her very much, because she was as like our stepmom. My mom started getting into deep depression, and she would start going out late and drinking, and she would be partying all the time, and we would hardly see her. We started moving from house to house because there was no stability, and from school to school as well. We didn't have any school that we stood longer than a year. We moved around a lot, and in one of those occasions, we were staying at somebody's home, and there was a kid there that I thought we were like friends, and he ended up taking it further, and he at that point molested me, and I was about 8 years old. And when my mom found out, of course, we left, but we didn't have anywhere to go. So we were living in a car for a couple of days, and someone found out, and they ended up calling the cops. And the police picked us up. We didn't want to let them in the car. We actually pretended that we weren't in there. And we put up like covers over the window. It was just so obvious. But to us, being young, we thought it was just like a game. The cops ended up convincing us to open the doors, and they took us into foster care. And at that point, we were separated. It was the first time I've ever been separated from my mom or my sisters. And in the foster care center, they separated us by age. So it was my older sister was still living with my dad, and then the three of us were in different places in the foster care system. And they noticed how depressed we were and how unhappy we were. We would just cry and cry. And some family decided to take us in and foster us. And I don't know how they would foster three girls. That I don't know, but they fostered us, and they had two children of their own, a boy and a girl. And that didn't last very long because we'd fight all the time. But imagine 5 kids running around the house. It was hard. So they couldn't do it anymore. So they ended up, calling, I guess, back the social worker. And then another family offered a woman. Actually, she didn't have a large family. It was just her living in her home. And she offered to take us in. And then, so that was kind of very structured. She was very, very picky, and it was kind of weird. We weren't allowed to do much. We were scared to break anything. So that didn't last very long. And then the third foster care home, the woman that took us, she was a Christian woman. And she seemed like she knew fostering. She had a different care, a different kind of heart. She wasn't like the other women. And she had other people that she had fostered that were grown, that were in and out of the house. And it was just a different kind of, more of a family feel. In that moment, they ended up sending us to a Christian Bible camp. And that's when I first heard about, just Christ. I knew that there was something there. But I didn't know who Jesus was. I knew that God existed, and I knew that it was something that he needed to be part of my life, but I did not know Jesus Christ existed or who that was. I always thought Jesus was like a saint or like a statue or something. I never knew who he was. So time goes by. My mom ends up getting custody back of us. And she seems to be getting everything together and having a job. But time passes and she starts going down again. She starts going out and drinking. And later I find out, as you get older, people start telling you what really happened. And she was heavily into drugs. And so she wasn't able to sustain a house or sustain us. We lived in other people's homes. We lived out of whatever clothes we had. My sister would dress us and get us to go to school. But we would always be moving around from house to house. Still at this point, I'm like already 10, 11. And I still don't even, I barely had any schooling. So it was one night where one of the nights I last saw my mom, she was very intoxicated. I had gone up in the middle of the night to go to the restroom, and she was just sitting at the table and she didn't look well. And I went up to her to see if she was okay. And that was the last memory that I have of my mom. And she told me to go back to bed. And so that I hadn't seen her in such a long time that it was just hard for me to see her at like 2:00 in the morning in the middle of like a bathroom break. So that was the last time I saw my mom, because a couple nights later, she ends up having a car accident. Somebody ends up taking a red light as she's coming home from a party, a club, and this person takes the red light and hits her, and she went flying out of the car, and she died at that moment. She died instantly on the spot. I was 10 or 11 years old at that point. So we ended up moving in with my grandmother. We moved to Florida because we did not want to move in with my dad. At this point, we didn't want anything to do with my dad. Just the constant, like, not seeing him and not knowing who he is and the woman he was with, and we didn't know her very well at the time. And so we ended up living in Florida. My grandmother took us in, and that was very hard because her children were already raised, and she's bringing in, now at this time, my older sister joins us, so she's bringing in all four of us. And she's already elderly, and she has to deal with 4 girls under 17 years old. And so that was definitely a challenge. And on top of that, her daughter died, and she was very angry, and she was just very angry that her daughter had died. And I don't think she really understood at that time how much we needed her support, that it was our mother that died. She didn't treat us very well for the couple years that I was there. She was very angry, and she would call us names, and she would tell us that she would just call us names and belittle us and tell us that we were going to be, prostitutes. And I guess that was her way of putting fear in us that we wouldn't turn out that way. And, but every parent loves differently, and that's what happened. So it didn't last very long. I think I stood there maybe 2 years after my mom died, and my older sister already had gotten back to California because my grandmother could not put up with her. She was acting out a lot. And so my grandmother sent her back to California with my dad's side of the family. My sister at this point is 17. She met a guy, and she's pregnant. And so when my grandmother and I started clashing because I couldn't just tolerate just the emotional abuse and the physical abuse, I retaliated. I would just snap back at her, and I just couldn't handle it anymore. And they ended up sending me back to my older sister. And mind you, like I said, she's pregnant at 17, just with this guy. And now she's getting a 14-year-old. And I think 13-year-old. I don't even know. I think 13, 14-year-old. I'm like in 7th grade. And she's trying to raise me and make sure I go to school, but at the same time with her daughter and her husband. And I just kept skipping school. I was not interested. I was like starting to act out, I guess, in different ways. And my sister and her husband at the time, it did not work out. So they end up getting separated. And we don't want to come back to Florida because at that point they already shipped us off to back to California. So we didn't want to come back to Florida because we didn't feel that they would take us back. So we ended up going back to that stepmother that my father was dating at the time. My older sister still was in communication with her because my older sister had lived with my dad for so long and with that woman. So there was a relationship there. And so my sister decided to let's move in with her and see if she can help us. And so no choice, moving in with her with my sister's baby girl, and things happen. We got into many arguments, and my older sister ends up leaving me, not like leaving me there, but I really didn't want to go with her either. They convinced her or they left me. I don't really know that part of the story, so I can't say. But I ended up staying with my stepmother and her daughters. And at the time, she already has a son. She has 2 other sons. And so living with her and her children was kind of difficult. It was, of course, there's always favoritism because those are her kids and I was not her kid. So there was times where I felt not saying that she did it on purpose, but there was times where I felt that I was neglected and I was set aside for a lot of things. Like when it was Christmas time, they would receive stuff and I never received stuff. And it was just like little things like that where I was treated differently. Of course, a child, I'm already 14, going on 15, and I'm starting to feel like I'm not getting anything from, no love, no care from her. So at this time, I'm already 15 and I meet this guy who I think is going to be like my Prince Charming, and he's going to take all my worries away, and he pursues me. I end up falling in love with him, and I decided to move in with him. I'm 15 years old, and my stepmother, didn't really say no, or if she did, I don't remember her giving me a hard time about it. So I ended up moving in with him, and his family did not accept me. They were very like, who's this? Why are you bringing her to my house? And his mom was very jealous, and so they were very rude to me, and they would try to say that I would do things that were bad in order for him to be mad at me. And it was just like this constant back and forth. And so about a year passes, and at the end of 15 going into 16, I end up pregnant. And a couple months into my pregnancy, more like 6 or 7 months into my pregnancy, I was like, I need to have, I'm sorry. And by the way, at this point, I meet this guy and we're in Mexico. Okay, so I'm sorry, I missed that part. So when I went back to California with my sister and ended up moving in with my stepmother, I dropped out of school at 7th grade. I never went back to school. My stepmother could not afford to maintain us, so we moved to Mexico. And in Mexico is where I met this Prince Charming that I'm talking about. So living in Mexico, I ended up pregnant, like I was saying. And I'm like, I need to have my baby in America. I'm not going to have a baby that is from out of the country. I'm not going to go through this paperwork and, papers and whatever that is. I knew that it was not okay to have, if I am an American citizen, I'm born in America, that I should have my child in America. So I left at 7 months pregnant, and I went back to my stepmother had moved back to California, and so I moved back with her, and we went through the natal care, the doctors were like, where have you been for 7 months? And I was like, yeah, I was in Mexico. So I ended up finishing my term in America, in California, and I had my first son, and his name is Christian. And after I had him and everything was okay, doctors checked him out. A couple months later, I ended up moving back to Mexico, where my Prince Charming is. And it's just different. Something happened in the matter of, 6 or 8 months that I was gone. And he started getting angry and aggressive and abusive. And we ended up getting a place where we can live with the baby, but he was being very aggressive and kind of like sketch, like weird, and then I ended up finding out that he was cheating on me the whole time I was gone. And so I confronted him, and he got very angry and he punched me straight in the forehead. And all I can remember was that I need to get out of here. And it was already late, so I wasn't gonna like get up and take my child in the middle of the night. So I waited till the next day until he left for work, and I grabbed my stuff and I left. And I called a friend in California, and she picked me up. She came all the way to Mexico, picked me up with the baby, and I ended up back. And this is already time, so yeah, Christian is, time has gone by. We're talking about 2 years already in that whole weirdness that I kept avoiding and stuff. So Christian's already about 2.5. No, he's already 2 years old. And going back to California with my friend and, being depressed because what he has done to me. And I end up finding out that I'm pregnant again. So at that point, I was so just like, I cannot have this child. I cannot bring another child into the world. I can barely even deal with the one I have. And I went to an abortion clinic, but I was already more than 24 weeks. And so they said I could not have an abortion. And so I said, let's do it then. And I ended up carrying my son full term, and that's Alexander. And so at this point, I'm like, 18, 17, going on 18, and I have already 2 boys. And I'm trying to figure life out. I'm trying to just get it together. I'm trying to get a house, get an apartment, just me and my kids, and figure what adulthood is and just tough it out. I ended up meeting back up with my older sister, and we decided to get an apartment together, and that lasted about 2 or 3 months, maybe longer. I'm really bad with time. And then it ends up being that we lose the apartment because money orders went missing, and I don't know what happened. The rent got stolen. So we ended up getting kicked out. But there was this man that was always like a friend, and he would always reach out to me and tell me how much God loved me and how much Jesus loved me. And I was like, he's the only one I feel like I can go to. And he would rent out his house, like rooms in his house, to people that needed from his church. And so I called him up, and he picked me and the boys up, and we ended up moving in with him. And so we were there for a couple of months, a little over 3-4 months. And I started to feel like things were starting to get better. And started looking for work. And started to feel like I was adulting. I remember one day we came home from a day we went shopping. I had bought the boys some clothes, some shoes, and I came home with Burger King that day, and I was feeding Alex at the time. He's a year, and Christian is about 3 years. He's a year. Alex is a year, and Christian is about 3 years. And I remember sitting feeding Alex because he was still a baby. And Christian had finished eating early because he would eat everything like super quick. And he wanted to go try on his socks and his shoes. So he had gone off to go do that. And I stood in the kitchen talking to one of the other people that lived in that house. And I didn't even want to talk to him, that person. Like, it was just some random guy that lived there. It was just, I was just feeding my son, and I don't know, I just was like, get this guy away from me. Anyways. So when I went to go look for Christian, I couldn't find him anywhere. So, of course, I have Alex in my arms, and I'm running around the whole house, and I don't know, this house seems so big, and I couldn't find him anywhere. I looked outside. I looked out into the back where there was a pool area, and in that flash, in that moment, I didn't see him. I could not see anything. I couldn't find him. I started to just freak out. And then I said, I'm going to check the pool again. And when I went to go check the pool, there was Christian. He was floating at the top of the pool. He had one of his little Burger King toys fell into the water, and he had went to reach it, and he fell into the pool. So, I had to get into the pool, and I had to pull him out. And I'm trying not to cry. So I had to pull him out of the pool myself because all of a sudden nobody was around. And I remember trying to resuscitate him and being on the phone with 911. And I just couldn't figure out how to do it. I was just in just a mess. And I remember the phone kept hanging up on the operator. I don't know why the phone would hang up. It hung up 3 times. I called 911 3 times. And the phone hung up. And I could hear the sirens coming. And I'm screaming for somebody to help me. And nobody was in sight. Not even that guy that I was talking to was there. Nobody came. So finally the paramedics got there. And they put us in the ambulance. And we went to the hospital, and at that, they tried to resuscitate him, but it was already too late. And they asked me, they told me that he was no longer gonna, if he did live, he would not have brain function. He would be brain dead. So I had to make the decision to let him go. So, in that turmoil, we have to have a mass for him and funeral for him. And my sisters end up coming down. We're coming to California. They end up coming to California for the funeral. And then they were like, you know what? You need to come back and live with us. And I was like, I have nothing to lose. And that was in February of 96, where I jumped on a plane and I came to Florida. And within that time, that is when I met this guy. And this is where our testimonies unite.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, we meet each other, and first impression was, okay, so he's cute, but whatever, you gotta play hard to get, right? Because he can't know that you like him, so you gotta play the game.
She's in my friend's house, my best friend's house.
You gotta play the game here, guys.
And I come over, and then I know her sister because of my best friend. Because they were dating for a couple of years. And then I see her there on the bed, and she's like filling out an application. But the way she's dressed, she's wearing like a long dress and stuff like that. So she looks older, and I'm just like, okay.
I was getting ready for an interview.
Yeah.
Because not even like a month living there, I was trying to get a job. And so when I met him, I was actually in a dress of my sister's, and I was filling out applications.
So anyways,
he said I look like an old lady.
I wasn't impressed.
Say the truth.
You look like an old lady. So
he said I look like an old lady.
Like I wasn't impressed. I was like, no, I wasn't, not interested. That's the word. I wasn't interested. And then where I lived with my mom and my best friend, he lived in the building right in front of me, and then the complex had a pool. So we went to go and hang out at the pool, and we started drinking, and then one thing led to another.
Dun, dun,
and then I think she kissed me because I always was the shy one that wouldn't do the first move. Or maybe I did because there was tequila involved.
Damn tequila.
And we dated for a little bit, and then I don't know, just like it like the time was like wrong timing at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I was going through a lot, dealing with not having Christian anymore and having a new life here. And so...
And I was alone. Like, I was single for so
depressed
long. And I was just like partying. And at that time, I had a business with a friend of mine. So we were making good money. So I was like, no, I don't want a relationship right now. I'm not. No, not now. I'm in a good time in my life. So I thought.
So months go by. We're here and there dating, kind of. We end up dating for a while. And then I decided to go back to California. And I just needed to go back. You know, sometimes you have to go back and revisit because you think you're missing something. But it was really because I was used to living in such a dump in different places there that I thought that's where I needed to be. And I felt really out of place here. I felt like I didn't know what was going on. I wasn't familiar with the culture here. Just my sisters. I just felt really out of place. And where I felt at place was back with that kind of world and that kind of sorrow and that kind of pain and with my stepmother. And so I ended up going back and trying to make it work, live there with Alex. And I moved in with my stepmother again. And things were different because at this point I'm already 18. So I wasn't that shy girl anymore, or that passive girl that would just stay quiet or only just have like moments of I started to speak up, and I started to ask her why she was that way with me, and we got into arguments, and in that month or two we still spoke over the phone. And
we wrote letters.
I have those letters.
Back then, you used to write a letter.
He doesn't have any of my letters. I'm just lying. I have his letters.
No text message.
And we had beepers. But I remember I used to use the house phone, and they cut the phone off so I wouldn't call you. I would have to go across the street to a payphone to talk to him or to my sisters. And I started a job there, and it seemed like everything was going well, but I didn't have the support that I knew I would have, but I just had to go back one more time. And so I decided to come back, and I called my sister. And at this point, Roly and I were still kind of together, but it was very hard because it's hard to have a long distance relationship with no phone and just letters. It was very difficult. And he was going through his stuff at the time. With that job, and I was just like, I want to come back. So I called my sister, and I'm like, let's surprise Roly. And she's like, okay, let's do it. So she bought my ticket, and she brought me back to Florida. And I remember
so that night that she came back, okay, so while she was gone, all the what we would call adult toys, in the sense of cars and jet skis and motorcycles and all that stuff that I had with this business of my friend, the business went sour, and we had to split up. And now I'm having to give back stuff to the bank and stuff like that. So the night she came back, my motorcycle, I had been switching it from house to house to house to house so that they couldn't find it. But then my parents had gotten a call that there was already a private investigator, and they had put in a call on the motorcycle. So they were looking for the motorcycle. So if they would find me on the road with the motorcycle, I would get arrested, whatever. Then I needed to call this number to just give it back to the bank.
The bounty hunter was after you.
Yeah, the bounty hunter. So that they couldn't take the bike. So whatever. I did that. I called the number, and I had to wait for like 4 hours. I would call the number back of the guys who were coming to pick it up, and they were like, yeah, you're the next bike we're going to pick up, and this and that. And so then my friend is calling me saying, hey, you got to come to my house, this and that. It's something I got to show you, this and that. And I was like, bro, whatever, not now. Let me deal with this. I'm here thinking it's whatever, some type of weed or something that he was trying to show me or something, because it was all drugs we used to do, smoke weed. And whatever, they finally came and they took the bike, and then I go to my friend's house and I walk in and everybody's all looking sketchy at me and I'm like, what? And then she pops out with Alex from the room, and I'm just like, I'm in shock, but I'm like, you've been gone for so long and we haven't talked. And it was just like bad. It was like a bad moment, but it was a good moment, you know, because in the beginning,
he called me the B word at that moment, by the way.
In the beginning,
he was so mad.
I had fallen in love with Alex, and I had never had a kid, or none of my friends at that time had a kid. But he was just, he was such a lovable child, you know, and like he needed love, and I don't know, I fell in love with Alex first. But anyways, so that night ends, and we kiss goodbye, and then that was it. The next day, it was like,
I'm like, okay, all right.
two. After that, it was like two peas in a pod.
Let's do this. And so we've been together. Our actual date together, we say, is September 5th of 96.
Excuse me.
And then, you okay, old man?
It's late in the day.
September 5th of 96. And then we moved in with each other in February of 97.
Mm-hmm.
And
we got our first apartment.
Yeah.
In Kendall.
And we've been together since then.
Yeah.
Both individually suffering with him, with his trauma on his own and my trauma on my own.
Yeah, because we were together, but we would never really sit together and like talk about what we were going through.
I don't think we even knew, though. I don't think we even knew how to talk about that. Mm-hmm. I think it was just something that you go through a trauma and you just suppress it because you don't know how to voice it. You don't know how to deal with it. And you don't know if people are going to understand what you're going through. And so that was about 18 years of that. And love pretty much held us together. There was many times where we wanted to just part ways.
Yeah.
Him dealing with the depression and me feeling like just afraid. I was afraid that I became controlling over my children and their safety, and just consuming, overwhelmed with something happening to them. Obviously, the trauma that I went through is because of that. Why I would be so protective,
and most of the time when we would talk, like she would say, like, you know, it's over, I can't anymore. This and that. And I would cry and beg her, and I'll change.
Yeah, he had moments where he would push me to limits, and I couldn't anymore, and it was just like.
And then it got to the point where when the last one that she said, that's it, it's over, and then I said, you know what, you're right, it's over. Like I was already done with.
And this
trying the whole
2014. So 2014 is when we both were like just done. Not only done like in our relationship, but just like done with carrying the weight of, well, I know I can speak for myself. I was done carrying the weight of my child dying. And that was 18 years of suppressed, not speaking, not getting any counseling, not anybody to voice it to what I was going through. I was going through extreme trauma all day long, every day, tortured about that event over and over, where it became where I couldn't be alone because I would go back into that moment. I was constantly reminded of that day. And so what happens is I would always try to be with him or with someone, so that way I wouldn't sit there by myself to remember and go over it again and again and again. And it was like nonstop torment. For 18 years, I was tormented from my son dying. And that also caused a lot of pressure on our relationship because I was very needy and I wanted all of his attention.
And I didn't know how to be needy because I grew up kind of on my own. My parents didn't give me any affection, or they weren't there for me. So I grew up on my own. I don't know how to give love.
Yeah, so you have two crazy people broken trying to figure this out. So 2014 kind of explodes. I had cremated Christian so I can bring him to Florida. And in 2014, I decided to go back to California and bury him. I remember it had to be in it next to a tree where I had a picture of him. And so Alex and I went to California and we went and we buried his ashes. And as soon as I did that, something lifted. But it wasn't a good thing. It was like, at that point, I released Christian from that. But then I had to deal with all of this pain and sorrow. And like, I started actually trying to voice out that I was not okay. That I was not okay pretending that I was okay anymore. Like, I was done with the facade of making my life seem so perfect. Because that's what I thought it needed to be. But inside, I was like dying.
Yeah.
I was dying. And so I remember coming back from that trip and we got into a really big fight. And at that point, we were deciding that was over. Mm-hmm. And it was getting towards like Thanksgiving. And I had reached out to my sister. I was like, aren't you just tired of the same thing over and over? And like trying to figure out what was being processed in my heart. But I didn't even understand how to voice it. I just knew that something was not okay anymore. My sister reached out and she was like, hey, do you want to come over to my sister-in-law's house where she is having a house of prayer? And I was like, okay. At this point, I was like, I'll try anything. And we had gone to church before.
Yeah. But
as a family, for the Catholic way, because that's how we were raised. But it just never kind of stuck. I never really understood what they were saying. I just never really was engaging enough to continue. But when that night of the house of prayer, I remember it was like that Wednesday, I think, or that week of Thanksgiving of 2014. I don't remember which day, but I remember going and they told me about Jesus. And that was the first time I've ever heard who he was and what he did for us. And I instantly fell in love with it. And at that moment, I felt receiving him as my Lord and Savior. It was as if everything I've ever wanted was filled inside of me. And I remember leaving there so happy and joyful. And I remember coming home and trying to explain this to my husband. And he's just like,
Nah.
He's like, what is wrong with you? Crazy.
Yeah.
And I was just trying to express to him what had happened. And it's just, how do you express Jesus just delivering you from so much pain? You can't express that. It's just, you can't. And so I remember telling him, I'm following Jesus. And he was like, okay.
No, and you were like, we're getting baptized on Saturday.
Yeah, so the next day, she follows up with me and she's like, do you want to get baptized? And I said, whatever it is that Jesus says we're supposed to do, let's do it. And I called him and I was like, we're going to get baptized this weekend. And he's like, what? And it was like Wednesday. So I really had only Thursday, Friday to convince him to come on that Saturday.
I remember she told me and I was just like, listen, I have my own relationship with God, so I don't need no baptism or nothing like that.
He was like, I don't want to be like those people that walk around all religious and stuff. I don't want to give up my music. And he just started telling me all of these reasons why he didn't want to be a Christian. Like he didn't want to be a follower or whatever that was to us at that time. And I was just like, well, I'm going. if you don't want to go, you don't have to go, but I'm going. I know that this is good, and I'm going, and I'm taking the kids with me. And so I was like, I didn't even bother to try to convince him. I was like, if you don't come with me, you stay home. And we were, like I said, we were in a rocky place. We were ready to give up, but there was still something that kept us, that we wouldn't make that step to separate. So that Saturday, he came, and he was rebellious in his way. And he was like,
yeah, but
let me go see what I don't have anything to lose.
Yeah, so those days I had thought about it, and I had talked to God there, saying like, but I gotta stop the drinking and the smoking and my music and my style of clothing and this and that. And like Friday night, I was just like, you know what? Let me just go and see. Let me just go and see what this is about.
And so
we went.
We ended up going. We all decided, after sitting through a 6 hour
6 hour
testimony,
all the way until the end of the 6 hours. I was just like, yeah, no. And then there's this one guy that comes in at the end and gets his testimony, and I kind of was able to relate to him because he had been in a gang, and me growing up, I've been in a gang, and there was stuff that he talked about that it kind of touched me. So each time anybody came into the room and they give their testimony, this and that, they would pray over people, and you know, they would call the spirits and let the spirits flow, and I would just be like, yeah, nah. But this guy, there was something about this guy that
your testimonies were similar, very similar.
Yeah,
the struggles were
kind of open, and I remember I'm standing there, and I got my eyes open and my hands up, and then I hear this audible voice, and it says, "How has your life been for the past?" I don't remember that time, 42 or 43 years. And I said, "Crappy." And he said, "What do you got to lose?" And I said, "Nothing." And I gave myself to God at that moment. But at that moment, I opened my eyes, and I got my kids next to me. So I was like, that wasn't them. So I didn't really realize that at that moment, that was God audibly talking to me. But I gave myself, and I cried, and
we got baptized.
That same day.
All 4 of us got baptized that day.
Yeah,
together as a family.
That church was a huge church. They gave you a robe, you changed, you got in. They had like a couple of pools, and we did it as a family.
And that was 2014 in December, and we've been walking in Christ since then. It has not been easy. There's been a lot of change that we've had to do as Christians. Like, we're constantly being sanctified, right? That's the thing with Christianity. But I truly believe that all of the stuff that we endured helps us endure now, walking with Christ.
Yeah. I've always said that everything that we endured, everything that we went through, yeah, it sucked for us to go through it, but it's to help somebody. That's why they say, as a Christian, they say the best way to tell somebody about Jesus is telling them your testimony, where you were to where you are and where you wish to be. Because that's how they'll see what Jesus done for you.
And so our marriage is renewed and restored.
Yes.
And only through Jesus.
Amen.
And every day it is renewed and restored through Jesus. We've learned to not depend on ourselves for our relationship. We've learned to pretty much to go to our Father and tell on each other. Like, He's not doing what I asked him to do. And it's good to have a God that listens, and He cares about your relationship with your husband, with your wife, or your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your family, your friends. He cares about your relationships with them. And He is a restoring God. First restoring you to Him and restoring relationships. We just want to thank you for listening. And our prayer is that through our testimony that we would find like-minded Christians that have gone through maybe something the same, or maybe sharing something that you've gone through, and how good God is and how He restores. Thank you for listening. We love you very much. We're praying for each and every one of you, and God bless you. Bye.
Bye.